subscription pricing means that you as the buyer are agreeing to pay a fee in perpetuity, or at least until the end of your contract term, in exchange for a product or services that is rendered to you.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
I mean, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the undeniable relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and our guest today is Ryan Glushkoff. Here are three things you really want to know about Ryan before we start. First, he's founder of Fraction 8, a pricing and product management consulting firm that focuses on B2B software, exactly where we want to be. Ryan was in the very first price class I ever taught for Pragmatic Marketing. Well, think of it this way, from student to consultant. Woohoo! I guess we're going to test him a little bit today, see what he learned. And finally, third, he and his wife are Canadian, but the magic of Disney brought them together. Now, you know this is not a touchy-feely podcast, but that may be a story we want to hear. Welcome, Ryan.
Hi, Mark. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you here. Hey, how did you get into pricing?
Well, I think it starts with one of my core beliefs that pricing is a blend of art and science together. You've got to be good with numbers, of course, because it is pricing after all, but you have to also be very good at discerning behavioral patterns that you are not easily visible in the market. Now, that said, my educational background is in engineering, so I've got the math side taken care of. But I've also spent my career working in the B2B technology space, initially on the custom build enterprise software side and later on the mass market side. So I've seen both sides. Now, like you alluded to in the introduction, my first exposure to pricing was actually at Walt Disney World, where I not only met my lovely wife, Tui, but I was also helping roll out a theme park and vacation package ticketing and pricing structure that they're actually still using today. So if you go to Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida and buy theme park tickets, you're using some of the infrastructure that I helped put in place.
Rarely am I jealous of my guests, but I want that job.
Yeah, I spent 3 years down there. I've definitely been to all 4 theme parks more times than I can count. But now that I have young kids, I've started to go back. And now that they're opening the Star Wars parks to the theme park, I'm definitely going back.
Oh, nice. Okay, I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
After Disney, I worked for 3 different mass market B2B software providers in a marketing capacity. And because of the time, they all tended to be on the smaller size. No one in-house or very few were focused on pricing. And I actually happened to love pricing. So I ended up being tasked with helping with it or being tasked with owning it overall. But eventually I got a little tired of the equity-backed startup world. So for the last 2 years, I've been working for myself, providing pricing and product marketing expertise for B2B technology companies. Wow.
That sounds great. And I was expecting you to say I got into pricing when I took your price class and fell in love with it.
That definitely helped. That actually,
okay,
I think the presence of your price class actually demonstrated to me that, hey, there should be a method and a process behind this, but it just hadn't made its way widely from the classroom into the corporate world yet. So there's definitely an opportunity there. You were onto something early.
Thanks. Hey, one of the things I love about the way you position yourself is you're willing to focus and say, this is what I do. And you say, I do B2B subscription software company. Is that right? Or did I throw in subscription and that doesn't fit? I do B2B software.
I tend to focus on software subscriptions. So those software subscriptions tend to be part of B2B technology companies as a whole. Those technology companies may have products that they sell via subscription and or other services that they sell as subscriptions. But my niche is focused on the B2B software world. And I tend not to focus in the B2C world as much, simply because I feel like there's some other psychological factors involved in that, which I'm, not an expert on. But and the B2B world tends to be more value-based. Like the pricing that I see and advocate in the B2B space tends to be more correlated with the value that the solution is delivering to the client.
That's pretty fascinating. I think that in the space that you find yourself in, which is software, they have no choice but to price based on value because they can't price based on cost. Otherwise, they'd give their product away for free. And so I love the fact that software people tend to do more pricing based on value. And I think that's awesome. Love that. I often think about the difference between B2B and B2C, as in when I'm doing B2B pricing, I am putting myself in individual buyers' shoes, trying to figure out how they make decisions. And when we shift to B2C, we often have these huge databases and we're doing analytics. We're trying to figure out how people make decisions that way. At Disney, though, it sounded like you were treating that more of a B2B, where you're thinking about individual families and how they make decisions. Is that close? And how did you approach that?
So that's true. At the time, and keep in mind, this is going back a long time. This is in the early 2000s, so long before the iPhone and long before CRM became a household name. So at the time, Walt Disney World didn't know anything about its customers, didn't know that you may have visited Disney World last year and went on a golf package with your buddies, but you're coming back next year and, planning to come with your wife and your kids and, maybe your wife wanted a spa package. Disney didn't have that kind of visibility. So they were really at the forefront of using historical customer behaviors to recommend what they thought your next vacation was. So our job was to help put that kind of logic in place. And at the time, it was very cutting edge. Now, that's almost that level of personalization in the market is almost par for the course.
Yes, but knowing Disney, they probably are on cutting edge of something else that we don't know right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk about subscription pricing. Why do you think subscription pricing is different than just normal pricing?
Good question. I think subscription pricing means that you as the buyer are agreeing to pay a fee in perpetuity, or at least until the end of your contract term, in exchange for a product or services that is rendered to you. Now, ideally, the buyer should be receiving value on a recurring basis that aligns with that pricing. Non-subscription pricing means that you're obligated to pay only once, or at least according to the payment terms of your contract. Now, I'm purposely not mentioning the value that a buyer derives from that purchase, because how the customer pays does not necessarily have to align with the value derived. Although I would submit to you that it works out better economically for the vendor if the pricing is aligned to the value created by the product or service. And that's the whole value metric side in software subscriptions.
Nice. And I love this whole concept of you use the word value metrics. I say the word pricing metrics, and I say pricing metrics because it's what do we charge for? What are we going to put a price on? But either one is fine for our conversation here. When you start thinking about pricing metrics, though, it's possible that traditional businesses, hardware products even, could have different pricing metrics, right?
Yes, that is true. The underlying economics are probably a little bit different because that piece of hardware probably has a cost underneath that they have to account for. But otherwise, there's really no reason everything can't be priced or offered to the market as a subscription, provided that the market is willing to pay for it in that context.
Yeah, I think it's about delivering the value and how it works. One of my favorite stories in this whole aspect was in the book, Madhavan Ramanujan's book, Monetizing Innovation. He tells the story of Michelin charging by the mile for new truck tires, as opposed to charging for the tire. And I thought that was brilliant because that's really getting more at the pricing metric. How is it that their buyers are getting the value for the product? What I love about software, though, is all of a sudden we open up the world to hundreds of different pricing metrics, tons of them. What kind of pricing metrics have you seen that you find interesting?
There's definitely a lot of different pricing metrics. I think pricing metrics need to hit three important criteria. So I always keep these in the back of my mind whenever I'm trying to help companies work through this topic. One, they have to align with your business need. So they have to resonate with the business problem that whatever is in scope of the subscription is trying to solve. Two, they've got to be easy to understand. And three, they've got to scale as use of the subscription and you extract value from the subscription. They've got to scale with that value. So, some of the pricing metrics that are the low-hanging fruit. There are some that are easy that companies tend to always start with. Users and features are, the two that you probably see more often. And some companies, and I've seen this also, young companies, they don't use a pricing metric or segment their offers at all. Their view on the world is when they're small is they're trying to get as many customers as possible. So they will just say, hey, it's one flat fee per month in order to get as many customers as possible in the system. Then they'll get around to segmentation later. Now, once you end up choosing a value metric, some companies can get, very innovative with this. You can choose, record counts, emails sent, number of video views. There is a space used if you're a Dropbox or a storage provider, cloud like that. So I think it varies tremendously based on the type of service that you're providing to the market.
Yeah. Do you have a process that you go through with your customers to brainstorm on pricing metrics or figure out what the right pricing metrics are for them?
The process typically can start with the product team, since the product and product management team has or should have their finger on the pulse of the customer's market problems. This is a lesson that I definitely picked up in my pragmatic classes with you.
Yes.
And starting with them to figure out what that initial list is, value metrics that correlate closely to the market problems that are being solved in the market. That's a good starting point. And then, I find, typically a conversation and a brainstorming exercise can then validate, a list from there. And then the next step is to actually survey the market and find, if there is a price a willingness to pay variation in that metric as the size of the market changes. And if you can find that, then you have the segmentation of your plans and your offering structure.
And I actually like the three characteristics that you gave. In other words, is it correlated with the value our customers are receiving? Is it solving our personal business problems, the things we have to get done? And then finally, does it grow as customers grow? And I thought those were great ways to evaluate them.
And it's got to be easy as well.
Oh yeah, that was the third one. I added one in that I liked.
But that's being easy to follow is a tough one. It's very easy to make things complex, but it's very hard to make things easy. So your example of, charging for tires based on the distance traveled sounds great. It correlates with their problem. They need tires to drive their vehicles. The more you use it, the more value you get from it. So there is scale there, but it's kind of tricky to track and understand if you're the buyer. Like, do I really want to be burdened with tracking, how many miles each of my tires has traveled, and then submitting that information to the person who sold me the tires? There might be other options that are easier there. That's where I think the science of pricing runs into the art.
Yes. I often think of what you just described as measurable or practical, but yeah, I'm completely with you. Relatively straightforward and easy. If you were thinking about selling tires to you and me, I don't know about you, but I would never, ever log my miles and say, here's how many I've done and send them reports. What a pain that would be. But I could imagine fleets already do that. And so it was no extra hassle or effort for them.
That's true. That might be true. I've never worked in the tire industry, so they might have that information at their fingertips. And if they do, that's something that could be discovered through market research. And actually that kind of gets at one of my, consistent pieces of advice that I give clients is, and I think this might have come out of the Pragmatic Marketing class. The answer is not in the building.
Yes.
Get out there and talk to your market, whether that be your customers, your prospects, your churn customers, or your white space prospects that you've never spoken with but are in your TAM. Get out there and talk to them, because there is no substitute for hearing from them firsthand.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's absolutely fabulous. Earlier, you alluded to startups or companies that are just starting out having really simple, flat pricing structures. And then, although you didn't say this, you could imagine as companies become much more mature, their pricing becomes more complex. Do you see a pricing evolution? So companies or products that go from super simple to super complex? And how would you coach or advise someone to go through that evolution?
I've heard of a couple. I wouldn't say it's a trend that I'll say is active, but it definitely is. There is a business strategy implied there. How I had it described to me was, we're a small company. We don't know what we don't know about our target market. In this case, it happened to be post-secondary institutions, colleges, universities, and there were very few other vendors like them that were providing the same service. So in that type of business situation where they didn't know what they didn't know and competition was minimal or non-existent, they essentially wanted to walk down the proverbial supermarket aisle and just forearm all of their customers into their basket. They just wanted to go for market share. So to do that, they wanted to keep their pricing super simple. They weren't segmenting it based on size of university. They weren't segmenting it based on giving them this feature or withholding that feature and telling them it's extra. They just wanted to give them the full access to the system for a flat price in the early going. And then as they matured and learned a little bit more about their market and the market's willingness to pay, then come up with some sort of segmented plan structure and an offering structure for that particular market. It's dependent on the type of business situation that you're in, of whether you pursue that approach. If you know the market well enough, then you don't have to take that approach.
I think that makes a lot of sense. If you think of it the way, to our listeners, we're talking in pragmatic terms for a second. And one of the things pragmatic marketing always teaches is go listen to your marketplace, know your buyers, know what their problems are. And those are phenomenal things that we should do. But it feels like the exact opposite of that we often hear is go build a minimum viable product, get it out in the marketplace, get people using it, figure out what works, what doesn't work. I could see companies who are doing the MVP type thing using that so that they can then capture usage data, willingness to pay data, and then make much, much more intelligent decisions about price segmentation.
I would also add that if you're building an MVP product and you put a semi-complex offering structure together that has 3 plans, 2 add-ons at each plan level, and the pricing, changes based on which plan you're on, and some features are included, some are not. I would submit that you as the vendor are putting some artificial constraints on your success without actually knowing what the impacts of those constraints are. So why do that to yourself?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And so then, if we're going to talk about the evolution of subscription pricing, that implies that companies are or should be constantly updating their pricing, their products, their structure, their offering. How do you help companies do that?
Carefully. Because number one, it affects your customers, assuming that you're doing a rate adjustment as part of that update. And 2, it also affects your sales efforts, which are currently in progress. For both groups, whether it's your customers or your prospects, my advice to clients is to segment the groups and create treatment plans that are tailored to each. So for customers, you may want to divide them up by size or the plan that they're on and customize how you communicate the changes or the price increases. Now, you have to be careful with customers, though, because a paying customer is better than a churn customer, even if they aren't as profitable as you'd like them to be. Case in point, even today, just this morning, today is Wednesday. I probably, like a lot of your future listeners of this podcast, received an email from Netflix informing me that my plan was going up to $13 a month. I got that notification in my email, and I also got it when I turned on Netflix at the gym this morning. So it was actually a flash on my screen on my phone when I opened the app. So they were proactively communicating to me. Now, for prospects, you want to think about who has an active opportunity and who doesn't. And you want to make sure you publish the rules of engagement to the sales team ahead of time so that they know what to say and what not to say. The last thing you want to have is your salespeople surprised by someone on the phone saying, asking them questions about, why are there two different prices being shown? Now, if a prospect does have an active opportunity with the company, you have to make sure that you're conscious of not disrupting that potential deal that's on the table. So depending on where it is in the evolution, whether pricing has been presented, whether it's not, you have some options, but you've got to tell the sales team how to handle those situations. If then, do this, else do something else. Now, if they don't have an opportunity in front of you, then you want to make sure that the sales team is positioning the new pricing, because you want to start moving the pipeline to the new pricing and away from the old pricing.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to add one piece to what you said, because you brought up Netflix, and it just drives home something that makes a lot of sense. Anytime you raise price on a subscription customer, you force them to rethink their decision. And I find that interesting, because I'm going to write my Netflix check every month, period, or you're just going to take it out of my credit card, and I'm not even going to think about it until you raise my price. And once you do that, some small percentage are going to say, yeah, you know what? I wasn't really watching Netflix that much. I think, I don't think I'm going to re-up it. And we're at risk when we do that. But I love the concept that says we've got new customers. Why don't we raise prices on new customers? There's nothing wrong with that. What do you think of that strategy?
That can make sense. In some cases, customers do speak to one another, so you have to be aware of that. I think the risk of customers talking to each other, I feel like sometimes it can be less of a risk in the B2B space, simply because companies tend not to share those kinds of details with one another. Well, sometimes they do. And I know some market verticals and some types of companies happen to, be very close with their peer organizations. Convenience stores happen to be one that just comes to me right off the top of my head. A lot of C-store executives, talk to one another, and they know what they're paying for each other's solutions. Now, in the B2C space, I think you've got to be a little more careful about that, just because people will, tell you what they're paying for Netflix, or it'll find its way into social media. So it is incumbent on the vendor to prevent those kinds of blow-ups in the market, to say, why are you treating one type of customer different than another? Even though charging different amounts based on different types of individuals, that price segmentation, and that's, as you've stated on many occasions, that's one of the most valuable tools in your arsenal to have.
Yeah, we just have to make sure that segmentation looks fair.
Correct.
Yeah. Nice. Hey, Ryan, as we're finishing this up, can I ask, here's the big question. What's one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a really big impact on their business?
I'm going to say two things. I was thinking about this in advance of our call today. One is the answer is not in the building. Get out there and talk to your customers. You should be doing that on a regular basis. And if you manage a team, that should be part of their performance goals for the quarter. They should be doing some number of in-market conversations every month so that they're staying up to date. And the second one is when it comes to pricing metrics, I'm not a fan of features and using features as a pricing metric. And the reason I say that is I came out of marketing. I have written my fair share of copy, and I like to think that I'm a little bit eloquent and a little bit articulate, but I feel like there is no combination of words that can adequately convey the amount of value that a solution can provide. And the market just will never understand it to its full potential. So why rely on words to translate the value of your solution? So choose a pricing metric that is not feature-based. Choose one that is something else. I feel like features are the easy way out, but my recommendation would be to choose something else other than features.
Can you give me an example of something that's not a feature-based metric?
Dropbox, storage space in the cloud, or Wistia with the number of video views, or a CRM system with that's charged based on the number of records in your database, or an email marketing program like HubSpot, which is, the number of emails that you send.
I think I understand, but one more question. Can you give me an example of a feature-based pricing metric? And then I think I really do understand.
A feature-based pricing metric would be one where a company has multiple plans, and they may have 10 features in the first plan, 15 features in the next plan, and 20 features in the next plan. So they'll say, well, the bronze plan does these things, but it doesn't do these things. The silver plan does everything in the bronze plan and a few more things. And the gold plan, well, it does everything. So you're paying more for more features. And I just don't believe that the market, a potential buyer fully values those features. And if your pricing is aligned to the value, I think you're leaving opportunity on the table.
Yep. Okay. Awesome. Understand completely. I definitely agree with the pricing metrics story, right? As in, if we can do pricing metrics around usage, and the more people use our products, the more value they get, boy, doesn't that just make all the sense in the world?
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, Ryan, thank you so much for your time today. If anyone wants to contact you, how can they do that?
They can contact me via LinkedIn or via my website at fractionate.io.
You might want to spell fractionate.
Sure. It's FRACTION and the number 8.io. That's fractionate.io.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thanks, Mark. It was a pleasure.
Episode 16 in the bag. If you got value out of this podcast, would you please help us out? Please subscribe or leave a review, tell a friend. Everything you do could help us out, and we are so appreciative. Please send any compliments, suggestions, or questions directly to me, Mark at impactpricing.com. And don't forget to listen next week to another episode of Impact Pricing.